So you want to retire within the next 12 to 24 months, but you're not quite sure, do I have enough money saved at this point in my life? If that's you, you're like a lot of people. In fact, you're like Suzie, who we were just introduced to. Suzie came to us, recently divorced, now is on the precipice of retirement, has always wanted to retire at age 62. She's currently 61. Casey, a financial planner on my team, brought this case into our weekly financial advisor planning meeting and said, hey, let's run through the numbers together to make sure she has a plan to get to and through retirement. And I thought this would be a great case study. So this video is going to be a little different than what we normally do, but I'm going to walk you through the areas that we talk about where we're helping people make a determination if we feel as though they're financially able and ready to retire. Hey, my name is Jim Martin. I'm a financial planner and the founder of Martin Wealth Solutions. We have a team of advisors that help people nationally navigate retirement and live the best retirement possible. And today, I'm going to walk you through the financial planning process that we leverage with our clients to help make sure they have a plan to get to and through retirement. Now, we break our financial planning process called the Smart Wealth System into milestones. And the first milestone we conquer is income planning and investments. And that's what we're going to cover primarily in today's video. After we've done that, we get into tax planning. Milestone number 3 is security, making sure you have the right Medicare plan, the right ACA plan, the right life insurances, etc. The number 4 is legacy planning, estate planning. Very important here. And then 5 is momentum. Once a plan is set up, it's important to stay on top of it. But today we're going to focus on number 1, which is our blueprint meeting, otherwise known as income and investments. And that's what Suzie was most concerned about. Do I have enough money to get to and through retirement? So let's go to the financial planning software. Let's take a look at where she's at, and then we'll talk about where she's going and ultimately some of the considerations you need to think about if you're planning your own retirement. Whether you're married or you're single, it makes no difference. We would apply the same math and the same logic to it. However, if you're single, look, you've got one income. It's a little bit tougher. You've got one decision on Social Security. You're not worried about survivor benefits. So the planning is slightly different from those who were married. So as we're beginning to dig into somebody's financial plan, the very first thing we want to figure out is where are they today? So where are they at right now? And as you can see from Suzie, has a net worth of a little over $1.3 million. We've rounded the number slightly for this illustration. And it's also important that, hey, this is just for illustrative purposes only. All the disclosures of the plan are baked in there. And it's important if you're going to apply this to your own situation to rerun the numbers. Now, with that said, let's walk through each one of these accounts so you have an understanding of where she's at. She has a checking account with $20,000. Now, you can see that I've only worked this into the balance sheet. That's important. I want to make sure that we're going to show this on the balance sheet, but what I don't want to do is I don't want to include this in a plan. Most people are not going to leverage their checking or savings for retirement income purposes. They use it for things like buying cars or going out to dinner or whatever you want, whatever is important to you, but they don't generally use this from an income perspective. So for the checking and the savings account, which is her emergency fund here, you'll see that there's $10,000. Now, in my opinion, she needs some work on the emergency fund. There's not enough money in that bucket right now. So we will address that through our financial planning process to talk about how do we leverage or create more dollars for that emergency bucket. Now, a lot of people say, do you really have an emergency fund or do you need one in retirement? Well, sure you do. Roofs have to be replaced. As you can see, she owns a house. You've got to put HVAC systems in there. Cars break, transmissions go out, fill in the blank. Life is very unpredictable. I'm a big fan of having an emergency fund, and I think you need between 6 months to 12 months of expenses in a bucket in retirement. Sure, you might make the case you need less, and that's okay. It's a real personal decision. For most of my clients, we'll generally recommend somewhere between 6 to 12 months. The other things that are important, Suzie has a brokerage account. I've not baked in the cost basis here, but I am going to add it in here. I did look right before I recorded, and it's $100,000. That means $50,000 of this account has capital gains exposure to it. But the other 100 is just dollars she put in there. Now that is included in the plan. As you can see, she's taking a little bit of risk. There's a 70-30 allocation. Suzie, for her, she's a pretty aggressive investor for a 61-year-old. She's not afraid of risk, but she doesn't want to leave it under a rock either. So she's kind of in the middle. She doesn't want to lose it. She's like a lot of people. I want to make a lot of money. I don't want to lose any money. So for her brokerage account, she's probably taking a little bit more risk than she's comfortable with, but that's because she has some gains on some positions she does not want to liquidate at this point. Then she has a 401k. Like a lot of people, she has a 401k. The money's right there. We're in the process of rolling that into an IRA, but right now now. It's got a balance of about 650, and she was in a target date fund, so a 60-40 fund when we met her. Now that's important to understand. Generally, as people are beginning to transition from working into retirement, I think you do need to be careful about target date funds. Let's imagine you have all your money in a 60-40 target date fund. So maybe that's a 20-30 fund or 20-35. And let's imagine the market were to drop 30%. And maybe that fund doesn't drop 30%. Maybe because it's a 60-40 allocation, it only drops, let's say 15%. Here's the problem. Because it's all packaged together, I can't go inside of it and pick and choose the investments that might actually not be down. I have to sell it all at a loss. So be very careful about leveraging target date funds. I'm not saying you shouldn't have them. I'm just saying be careful as you're approaching retirement to understand if all of your investments are bundled and that bundle is underwater, you might be in a position where you have to sell low. And I've not heard anybody enjoying doing that when the market's down. She has a primary house she owns outright, valued at $450,000. And here's a little weird nuance. She has a $100,000 whole life policy. Now, Suzie, she purchased this whole life policy a long time ago because she does have a daughter and she does want to leave her daughter $100,000. And I'm not sure if that $100,000 goal is because she's always kind of segmented this account or if it's just something she has come up with along the way. We've not dove into that yet because we're not into the legacy planning, but I will tell you that it does have a cash value of $45,000. So inside of the account, $45,000, and she's paying a little over $300 a month for this. So it's kind of an expensive endeavor, honestly, and it's something we're going to want to take a look at as we're thinking about her retirement plan to make a determination. Does it make sense to move these dollars to something else? Now let's talk about goals, because I think goals are really important here. Suzie's 61 years old and she wants to retire at 62. In fact, that's a big question. Can I retire at 62 and have enough income to get to and through retirement? And that's what we're going to break down today. When we're looking at this, here was some of her other goals. She wanted $4,000 a month, $48,000 a year. Now that's a core expense. That doesn't include extras like travel, new cars, etc. So we're going to bake that in as we go. In addition to that, she will need to bridge healthcare. So because she's going to retire at 62, she's got 3 years before she jumps on Medicare. So we have to do appropriate healthcare planning here and make some determinations. Now with ACA subsidies potentially on the chopping block, we're not quite sure how we're going to navigate this yet. So we have some question marks. Once Congress acts, we'll have some clarification on that, but that is a question mark for her. And then finally, she would like to leave $100,000 as a legacy. Now, when we look at her income, she makes about $95,000 a year. She works in the medical profession, her Social Security. She's assuming she's going to turn that on right at 62. We've not made a determination if that's the optimal time yet, but that's when she wants to turn it on right at 62. And she has a small pension of about $2,000 per month. That pension has a small inflation increase over time. I baked that in at 2% just because historically that's what that pension has ran at. Sure, you could put 3%, but I believe it's better to be a little bit more conservative here as opposed to aggressive. Now, again, when you're doing this on your own, if you're married, it's okay to understand this, but for Suzie's perspective, we didn't build in a survivor benefit, so we're not worried about that. So we're taking the higher of the amounts when we're making this determination, and we're also not worried about leaving these dollars to someone else. She just wants the maximum benefit she can receive for her pension. Now, it's important to understand that we've not added a couple things in here. We've not added a car, we've not added travel, we've not added some extras that could come up along the way, and we've not addressed that emergency fund, which is quite frankly a little underfunded. So now that we've done that, let's just say this was her retirement. So we're not going to add in all those extras. Does she have enough? So what do you think? Let's take a look. Let's go to the tape and see it. And I believe she does, right? So right now she's at 100% probability of success. But again, I don't really think she is because I believe there's other things at play here. So what we're going to do is start to add some things in. She likes to travel. In fact, that was one of her big things. Now, she's not a crazy traveler by her own estimation, but I want to say, look, and I think this is an important thing. So this is how Casey explained this to Suzie around her retirement. So let's be honest about time for a second. Let's imagine this right here is 100 years of life, okay? So let's imagine this is 0 to 100. And at the end of the day, Suzie is in the situation where she's 61 years old. So when we're thinking about her life, we're just going to take this off. This is the first 61 years of her life. She can't get that back. That's gone. All right. You can't go back and relive that. And then this is 60 to 100. Well, the average life expectancy for most people, a woman probably 61, is somewhere in her mid 80s. So we're going to go ahead and pull this off and say, if she gets there, great, but most people don't. This is what she has left. And that's terrible to put it that way, but that's what she has left. So when we're thinking about how do we maximize her time, what we want to think about ultimately is, what do we do here? She wants to travel. So we're going to say we need to build a travel budget in for the next 20 years. So from 61 to 81. And maybe once you're over 80, maybe you're not traveling as much, but we're going to do this every year. And we're going to start this at Suzie's retirement. And we're going to run this for just 20 years. Okay. So not crazy. And look, she's a modest woman. She's not someone that wants to take massive trips. So we're just going to say her travel budget's going to be $18,000 a year. I think for her, that might be enough. We don't know the answer to that, but we're going to add a travel budget in there. We're also going to add a couple other things that I think may be important. Cars. Like, believe it or not, cars don't last forever. They are lasting longer, which is great news, but they're not lasting forever. So we're going to do this every 7 years. She's the proverbial person that drives a vehicle until the wheels fall off. So I know I'm even being a little aggressive here with 7 years. She'll probably make me back out to 8. So we're going to back that out to 8. And she doesn't drive expensive cars. She's a Honda Civic, Toyota Camry kind of gal. So we're just going to say $40,000. We're going to say that every year for 20 years. We're going to say every 8 years for the next 20 years, she's going to need $40,000 to pay for a car, which seems fairly reasonable based upon her spending. Again, it's important for you to be realistic with your expenses and goals. Like, you're going to need a car in retirement. And I know you can drive them a long time, but at the end of the day, you'll still need a reliable car. As you get older, and maybe you don't want to be out there underneath it doing maintenance on it if you're that kind of guy or person, or a guy or gal rather. So I think it's important to just be realistic as you're thinking about expenses and all these. And again, the travel budget's a little aggressive. I tend to find most people slow down in their mid 70s, so I can back that number off if I need to. But for this purpose, I didn't want to. So now that we've added in a vehicle purchase and some travel, let's see how it works now, because I'm going to think it's going to change the numbers, and we're going to begin to make a determination. Here's the great news. She's still at a 95% probability of success. I'm really happy with this plan right now as it stands, but I think there's some other things we have to dive into. So as we're beginning to say in here, I want to stress test the plan. Because she's on her own, it can be scary. It can be this situation where we're a bit worried about the future. So let's do this. Let's imagine we have a bad decade followed by slow growth. Well, you can see that the numbers change pretty quickly. And in fact, in 10 years, the market's taken away her retirement. Now, during that period, what could she have done? She certainly could have spent less, right? So it's not as though you have to spend the same amount of money while the market's going down. You can spend less. You don't have to buy a new car every 7 years. You can stretch that out to 8, or even the travel budgets could come down a little bit. So we could stretch that out, and let's see what happens if we do stretch that out. Because again, I don't want to work with pie in the sky. I don't know what the market's going to do, but I do know that clients ultimately want to be very conservative here as they're beginning to make these determinations. So let's imagine we come over here for just a second, and we're going to change those goals. Instead of spending $18,000, let's say she spends $15,000. That's probably a pretty decent number. That's a couple trips a year, which is what she said she ultimately wanted to do. And then let's go here, instead of $40,000, maybe she drives a $35,000 vehicle. Maybe that's the right move for her. And also important, I think it's important to notice here, I use the retirement spending smile, which is a strategy which says that you're going to spend more in retirement in the first part of retirement and less later. Because while you're in your 60s and 70s, you've got your health, you have time, you have money, you have life. And as you get older, your health might pull back a little bit. You might spend less money at that point. That's a strategy that I like to leverage for most of my clients. But again, everybody's different, and we would have a deep conversation with her about this. Okay, so now that we made that determination, let's go and see how that impacted all the other pieces of a retirement puzzle. Now we're at a 98%. We moved from 95 to 98, which is good news. But let's take a look at a scenario where we have a bad decade and slower growth. And you'll see that now it's pushed out to about 80 years old before she's going to have to make some tough decisions. I think that's probably okay. This is likely not to occur. I'm not saying it won't, but it's likely not to occur. And we can make some adjustments along the way. But I think it is important as we're thinking about situations that you do understand what happens if we have a negative market, and how will that impact not just you, but also if you're married, your spouse. Again, in this scenario, we're not worried about a spouse. We're just worried about Suzie and her retirement. Let's take a look and say, okay, based upon these scenarios, what if she wanted to live a little? I know $500 extra a month is an enormous amount of money, but what does that do? Well, at that same scenario, it puts her in a pretty good position. Sure, she's going to have less money at the end to leave to her daughter, but still a pretty good place. And now let's go back to that life insurance policy, which I was talking about before. I'll be honest, I'm not a big life insurance guy. So I'm not in a scenario where I love life insurance. She's paying $300 a month. She's going to pay this forever or until she makes a determination just to start burning the cash down. And what if she was able to use this cash to do some maintenance on her house? Now, I know she has a legacy plan. I know that's important, and we've already factored that into the plan. So what if, for a second, what if we took that $45,000 and we leveraged that to beef up her emergency fund and do some deferred maintenance on her house? Most people who have owned a house for 20 or 30 years, they've got carpet they want to replace or a bathroom or a deck. I mean, we've all got it, right? We've deferred maintenance because the timing's been wrong or we didn't want to cash a check. She's not shared this with me, but I've done this long enough to know how these kinds of things work. So what if I just nuked this? What if I just took it off the plan, got rid of it, and said, all right, Suzie, we're going to delete this thing and it's going to go away. Okay. So it's done. We're not going to have this life insurance any longer. And we're going to take $20,000 of that and we're going to add that into your emergency fund. So now I feel more confident because that cash is there. And I'm also not paying $300 a month. What does that do to the scenario? Does that change the outcome? Because her goal, remember, was to leave money to her child. Like she wanted to leave $100,000 to her child, right? So that's important. And she also wants to live a really great retirement. And remember, scenario number one is she still has a 99% probability of success. And when we put $4,500 a month in here, had a 93% probability. So she's still in a position where she has a very high likelihood to hit her goals while maybe paying less along the way, which I think is a really nice thing. So for me, in her scenario, I would likely recommend that she not keep that life insurance policy, that she cash it in, beef up her emergency fund, and then do some deferred maintenance on the house, which I think is probably there. And if she doesn't have it, go take some trips, maybe bless her child with some extra dollars now, which, who doesn't like that? So there's a lot of scenarios out there. Here's the good news in this situation. As long as her spending is kept under control, it can work. Now, the other decisions we have to make is Social Security. Her plan is to turn Social Security on at 62. I'm not sure that's the best scenario. Based upon the math I've seen, it may make sense for her to delay Social Security and take Social Security at 67. Let me walk you through why. Now, I've ran the calc here and you can see that based upon the program's optimization, it says full retirement age is better. In fact, based upon her claiming it early as opposed to that, she'll have $365,000 less. But here's the real noise. She's on her own. She's single. The larger she can get her Social Security benefit, the more guaranteed income she's going to have. That is safety of running out of money. If all things fall apart, she'll still have her pension and her Social Security. And if she turns her Social Security on at 62, it's going to be a smaller dollar amount. In fact, maybe the better strategy for her is to leverage her brokerage account right over here, to leverage this brokerage account early in retirement to delay having to take Social Security. That also might keep her income lower, and by keeping her income lower, will potentially put her in a position to get subsidies if they exist. So I think that's a really neat way to look at it, and for her, that would likely be our recommendation as we get into our next planning meetings. For everybody out there, it's a custom strategy. That's how retirement works. I think this is really important. As you're planning your own retirement plan, you need to take a look at all of the hidden expenses in retirement. You need to understand the tax situation. Heck, we've not even gotten into taxes yet, but this is her tax map. I mean, look at this. Her taxes are really going to drop. And what I'm showing here is her delaying taking Social Security, and her ultimately, what she's doing here is leveraging her brokerage account in order to live on. When we're doing this evaluation, we might also consider some Roth conversions there. I don't know if that would make sense for her given that she's single and she's going to leverage a lot of these dollars and be in a relatively low tax bracket to and through retirement. But whether you're single, whether you're married, whatever your situation is, what I encourage you to do is run the numbers. Run the numbers, stress test them, plan them, and be nimble along the way. Look, she might have to make changes at some point. Who knows? But the important thing is that she has a plan that she's going to stay up to date date with. And when you build this plan, you update it every year because guess what changes? Inflation, taxes, a lot of different variables change every day and every year. And it's important to stay on top of that as you're doing financial planning. Hey, my name is Jim Martin. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do me a quick favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment in the notes if you want some follow-up on this, or if you found this video useful. If you want to learn more about what we do and how we do it, you can visit us on the web at martinwealth.com. More than anything, thanks for watching. We'll be back next week. Take care.